It's truly hilarious to think about how Marvel has screwed themselves over in just 5 years. They went from $2 billion movies to flops that lose hundreds of millions. So it's not shocking to hear that Marvel has decided to scrap a lot of upcoming projects that the audience clearly has no interest in an attempt to take less risks and invest in more surefire successes. Who could have guessed that the best way to make money is to produce movies and shows that the paying customer actually wants to see?
What is so hard to understand about that?
First up, we have Captain Marvel 3. This one is not shocking to anyone who's been paying attention. The first movie came between the two biggest Marvel films of all time and benefited in a massive way. They can ignore that all they want, but there's a reason they didn't feel confident enough in the character to give her a true sequel. If they actually thought the first Captain Marvel movie succeeded based on its own merits, they wouldn't have stuffed Monica and Miss Marvel into the sequel. Not sure who thought that a side character nobody remembers, or a character from the MCU's least watched TV show would be able to save Captain Marvel, but of course they didn't. The movie ended up being Marvel's biggest financial loss, and it didn't help that they spent almost $300 million on that pile of crap either. Even if they wanted to do another movie, it seems like Brie Larson is doing her best to move on from the character, and who could blame her? She went from being a potential leader of the Avengers to Marvel's go-to end credits cameo, leading up to the MCU's worst flop. She would be stupid to want to jump back into that hornet's nest, and Marvel would have to be crazier than Amber Heard to greenlight a third movie.
Bunch of functional idiots.
Then there's Ant-Man 4, and I'll admit this one is a bit of a shame. I enjoyed the first movie and parts of the second, but the third was undeniably terrible. They just turned the character into a punching bag for his daughter, who apparently thinks shrinking police cars during a protest gives her the right to preach to her father, a man who single-handedly saved the entire universe. The movie was just a weird mix of message-filled BS and extremely awkward dialogue, not to mention the horrifying CGI. MODOK was one of the most anticipated villains, and they turned him into a whimpering crybaby who yet again had to learn a lesson from Cassie, who is just better than everyone.
Hey, jump off a boat and let the boat leave. Starve in the ocean or get eaten by sharks.
That movie just serves as further proof that building up a female character as some unstoppable genius never works out. Nobody is gonna like some teenage girl who walks around acting like she's better than everyone just because she got involved in some crybaby protests. There were countless other problems in this movie though, like a seemingly unbeatable villain getting stomped on by a bunch of ants, and Wasp's mom taking over the story, effectively sidelining her daughter in a movie that had her name in the title. This movie was one of the first major box office bombs that the pandemic excuse didn't work for anymore, and it kicked off a really rough period for Marvel movies. Not surprising that Marvel doesn't want to take a risk on a fourth movie, but unlike the situation with Captain Marvel, Ant-Man is actually a well-liked character who just had one really shitty movie.
What a terrible joke!
Lastly, we have Eternals 2, which is arguably the least surprising cancellation. Even if it had all the hype in the world around it, at the very least the first Captain Marvel was financially successful. Eternals was a massive box office bomb consisting of a bunch of characters nobody gave a rat's ass about. Just some cheap attempt by Kevin Feige to force some more diversity into the MCU. And if you don't believe that, then you're not paying attention to what Kevin himself has said about deciding to prioritize this team solely in order to race and gender swap them all.
That is so deeply pathetic.
So it's probably not shocking to hear Kevin Feige really pushed hard for Eternals 2, and in a rare instance of a Hollywood executive using their brains, Bob Iger shut his idea down personally. Given what we know about the next Avengers movies and Marvel's intent to move on to the X-Men and Fantastic Four after that, it's pretty easy to figure out these Eternals characters have no place in the overall story. Nobody's begging to see them again when Marvel's busy teasing more Andrew Garfield and Hugh Jackman appearances. Anyone with a brain could figure out what Marvel themselves have already told us. This movie was created for the sole purpose of pushing their weird agenda onto an audience that showed they don't give a singular fuck about this crap.
I'm done. I'm done.
The bottom line here is that anyone hearing this news shouldn't jump to any conclusions yet. Yes, canceling movies based on what the audiences are buying tickets for is a good thing, but keep in mind we're still getting nonsense like the Thunderbolts in the very near future. It's a good sign that Disney may be waking up to the fact that audiences don't care about their virtue signaling. What isn't a good sign is when you see what they're planning to do with the X-Men and Fantastic Four. It's like a spoiled little kid who breaks his toy, and then when his parents get him a new one, he plays with it the exact same way, and shocker, it breaks again. They're going to repeat the exact same mistakes that ruined the Avengers and somehow expect different results with the Fox properties, which, just like the saying goes, is the definition of insanity.